Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. It is my sincere pleasure to be joined by directors Barbara Kopple and Cecilia Peck.
Thank you.
And we are so thrilled that you're here to discuss Shut Up and Sing this evening. The film's themes are so relevant to ongoing issues of free speech, culture wars, and media scandals. So I want to begin with how this film came to be. I read that you had approached the Chicks about following them on their Top of the World tour prior to lead singer Natalie Maines' comment about George W. Bush, but they had declined initially. When you first pitched it to them, I can imagine that you had no idea this would become a film about free speech and dissent. What did you have in mind for this film when you initially approached the Chicks about joining them on tour? What drew you to them both? What drew both of you to them as documentary subjects, even before Maines' infamous statement?
Me? Well, the Chicks were the #1 selling female band in history, and we actually knew them. We were friends with the band, so we loved their music, and we had asked if we could follow them on tour and just document that band at that time. And it's not that they didn't want to, but I think we just hadn't quite gotten going or come to terms at the very beginning, but they were taking a little video crew out with them on the road, so yeah, for their shooting for their website. So while we were making arrangements to kind of follow full time, they had that crew out. That's how it started. We just wanted to, be on the road with that incredible band.
And also to the minute that they said, we're ashamed that the President of the United States is from Texas, Simon was on our case. Get out there.
That's great. I love the dynamic between Simon and the band.
Oh, he's marvelous.
And I mean, when we talk about them saying, we're ashamed the president's from Texas, that's what was quoted, but you saw the way Natalie said it. She was giggling, it was a joke, it was almost an afterthought. There were 1 million people in the streets of London demonstrating. She really tried to make a joke and have humor in solidarity with this huge crowd in the streets, and really never meant to attack the president or even make a political comment.
Yeah. And it just seemed, those words were so innocuous. And somebody from The Guardian was there. I think her name was Patricia Clark. And 2 weeks later, it was all over America.
Well, I want to bring us to the title of the film, Shut Up and Sing, which is what a country radio DJ says she wishes the Chicks would do. And it's later incorporated into a lyric in the song Not Ready to Make Nice from the Chicks' post-scandal album, Taking the Long Way. And then there's other scenes of right-wing protesters that are saying the Chicks have bad manners, they're ignorant, they're dumb bimbos. At the time, Bill O'Reilly had said that they, quote, don't know what they're talking about, and that they're, quote, callow, foolish women that need to be slapped around. So we saw many scenes discussing how they stepped out of line of the political expectations of their musical genre. But how did you and the Chicks understand the gendered dimensions of how these right-wing protesters and news personalities took glee in berating and punishing the Chicks at the time?
Well, I think it's like Marty says in the film, it was the perfect storm. They were 3 chicks who seemed to represent the conservative heart of America, and they were made an example of. I think the warning was, this is what will happen if you use your voice to criticize the country, the president, and the war. And I think a lot of other artists were silenced or scared to speak up because of the Chicks, but I will say that it was an incredible privilege to be with them and bear witness to their courage and their artistry and their musicianship and their friendship. You say too.
I will.
Cecilia, your recent series, Seduced, Inside the NXIVM Cult from 2020 and Escaping Twin Flames from 2023 contend with cult group dynamics that insist upon high levels of physical and emotional control, groupthink, and of course, tightly controlled speech and self-expression. So do you see parallels in the work that you have done on these cultic groups and the kind of repercussions and punishment that the Chicks faced for expressing their opposition to the Iraq War?
I think that I've always been drawn to stories of people who use their voice and stand up for what they believe in. I think having had the privilege of working with Barbara and learning from her the power of verite cinema and of following a story and watching it unfold without imposing a structure or an ending on it is what I try to do more than any certain type of film. And I owe Barbara everything as a filmmaker for having given me the opportunity to learn from her and then to work with her. This was our second big project together, and we worked on more as well. I do see a parallel with a kind of, with the origin of hate speech on the internet influencing so many people. I think the Dixie Chicks, that was one of the first examples of how the internet was used to foment hatred. And there is a parallel with that, with a kind of indoctrination that I've profiled in my series about cults. So yes, they are linked.
So this year's Carsey-Wolf Center theme is panic. And as we saw in the film, and as many of us lived through, but also as we discussed at dinner, there are some undergraduate students at this point who had not yet been born at the time of this, the post 9/11 era. So the post 9/11 panic over terrorism threats was channeled into intense nationalism to drum up support for the invasion of Iraq. These days, we would now say that the Chicks were canceled. There's a scene at the press tour where Natalie is trying to find the right word for what's happening to them. They say they were Dixie chicked or banned. Did they see themselves in a tradition of entertainers and public figures who had been canceled for their political beliefs? I'm thinking of John Carlos and Tommy Smith, who raised their fists on the award podium in the 1968 Olympics as a symbol of Black power, or Sinead O'Connor, who had been canceled after ripping up a picture of the Pope on SNL to protest the church's cover-up of abuse. Also Colin Kaepernick, who came later, who was told to shut up and play after his protests and kneeling during the national anthem during NFL games. Did they have a sense of the history of this kind of political shunning of entertainers?
I don't know if they had that, but I think they had something that was even stronger than that. And what they had was standing up for who they were. They were in a period of transition. They wanted to break free of people telling them what to do and what not to do. And it also brought the band so close together, and they really had each other's backs, and they really stood up for each other. And I think that was the biggest moment for them, of really moving into a whole different direction and being connected with each other. And if we look, to the future, of what this comment meant, Bush's polls went way down. We also had 4 or 5 generations later of different students speaking up, particularly at Wall Street, and that was pretty amazing. So I think they made a very big impression, and they made an album that was absolutely incredible, that they wrote from their hearts. They had people supporting them. Taylor Swift in an audience, she just said, everybody has to remember, if you're a musician, what the very first song you learned to play and that you loved, and that was Cowboy, Take Me Home. And the Eagles helped them, and the Eagles let them be, their upfront band. And so they got a tremendous amount of support.
Another aspect of the film that was really moving was the unity among the Chicks. Marty and Emily are actual sisters and supported Natalie as they weathered this backlash. Their bond in creativity and business partnership was incredibly strong during this period. Could you both, as creative people, longtime friends, and collaborators, identify with this?
I think that it pushes you to be stronger. It pushes you forward rather than backwards. And I think that's what happened with the chicks, that they were just tremendously changed by this. They realized that what they said was important, whether it was taken one way or another. And I think they flourished from it. Yes, their career was hurt, but something else that was more strong and more magical happened for them.
And like Emily said, when our children are grown up, they'll look back on this time and we want them to be proud of how we acted and that we stood up for our rights as Americans to freedom of speech. And I think that really motivated them, wanting to have courage and have integrity at that moment.
And they did.
They
And
sure
they
did.
do. And Slade now plays with the chicks, and also Marty's daughter Eva plays. So,
Oh, wonderful.
yeah.
It's great. Well, there's a real incredible level of access you have to the chicks in the film. I was struck by the intimacy in the scenes of motherhood in this film, particularly in the scene where we are in the hospital as Emily is preparing to give birth to her twins, as everyone else is having a conversation about the Iraq War and reading tabloids. This scene of Emily was quite like a scene from a documentary you both collaborated on in 1999, A Conversation with Gregory Peck, about your father, Cecilia. In that film, we see you, Cecilia, in the late stages of your pregnancy and are with you in the hospital after the birth of your son, Harper. How do you both earn your subjects' trust to be granted a level of intimacy where you'd be welcome in a labor and delivery room? And Cecilia, how did it feel for you to be a subject of such an intimate film about your family, especially in one of the most vulnerable moments of your life after the birth of your son?
You talk.
Well, I think one reason the film works so well is that the chicks gave us such incredible access to their lives and just decided to open up completely and allow us to be part of everything, from recording the album to being on the ranch with Emily and and the births of their children. So you get to see them, having babies, making music, dealing with the controversy. We're really, really lucky that they were that open. As far as the film on my dad, Barbara made me be in the film because I got pregnant during it. And so it was, I guess, an opportunity to see that side of my father, becoming a grandfather, as well as looking back at his life and his career. So she kept pushing me in front of the camera.
That's not true. You walked.
But when it came to giving birth, I do admit that I had one, like as the producer of the film, I had one hand on the phone saying, Barbara, I think you should come to the hospital. This baby's about to come, on the other hand, pushing the baby out. So,
And I came, and I could have filmed the whole process, but Veronique, her mother, barred the door, and it was just me and a camera. But the great moment was seeing her after the birth of her baby and naming the baby, and just the beauty and the love that they had, and also talking to Greg and about what it meant to be a grandfather. And it was quite beautiful.
Yeah.
And very intimate.
Should we say the name of that film?
Yes, A Conversation with Gregory Peck, 1999. I highly recommend. It's
And we have Terry here.
My brother, Carrie Peck, is here.
Stand up.
Say
Who's
hi.
in the film.
Carrie's in that film. But, just in case the audience, our father was the actor Gregory Peck, and I think he made a lot of films that had themes of social justice, like To Kill a Mockingbird and Gentleman's Agreement, and I think he has inspired us both in our lives and careers, and I've always hoped to live up to that legacy with the films I've made, and especially working with Barbara.
But he still had the same fear and the same nerves as everybody. When he was going to be going out on stage, he was pacing back and forth, and he said, I guess I can't leave now.
Yeah.
So.
I was amazed to see him have stage fright.
Yes, yes.
How wonderful. Well, Barbara, many of your films, like Harlan County, USA, from 1976, and American Dream from 1990, feature subjects who are courageous in the face of immense pressure from the powers that be, like striking workers, women, and poor people on the margins. Cecilia, your recent work has brought out very intimate, revealing testimony from former cult members about their experiences. In your NXIVM documentary, we follow India Oxenberg's harrowing descent into a sexually abusive cult. And Barbara, I understand that you spent 13 months living with the subjects of your film in Harlan County. Continuing on the theme of building trust with your subjects, how do you both approach your own responsibility as filmmakers to your subjects and honoring the circumstances that they're inviting you into?
Well, I think with Harlan County, I had to go through a lot of tests, like drinking white lightning.
What is that?
It's something that's illegal that they brew in the mountains. And learning what it was for the first time to be blind drunk. Chewing tobacco. And just being there is really what's important. And showing up. And in Harlan County, I mean, my life was in danger as much as anybody else's. We were machine gunned with semi-automatic carbines. A miner was killed by a company foreman. Women took over the picket lines. And they went after us first because they didn't want to commit murder in living color. So they trusted us, and they were so glad that we were there, because even if we didn't have film in our camera, we wanted to, pretend that we did to maybe keep the violence down. And this is a place where people lived and died by their guns. You want to say something?
Well, I have made several projects with women who have survived trauma, and we've tried to approach those projects ethically in terms of not re-triggering or re-traumatizing subjects or putting them in uncomfortable situations or surprising them with questions they don't expect. So we've done a lot of work on making sure the sets are safe and that there's a lot of communication about what to expect, and also after the projects, and in terms of providing therapy before, during, and after. So those are some of the ways that I think we've tried to have an approach that feels safe and that has allowed people to trust us.
And also, too, I did a film with Mariel Hemingway called Running from Crazy. And she had 7 suicides in her family. And she wanted to tell her story so that her children would understand what was happening and the mental illness that was in that family. And one of the most extraordinary things is that we were able to find 43 hours of film of her sister Margot, who was this beautiful, vivacious model. And one of the most harrowing pieces, I think, that I've ever heard is her grandfather had just killed himself, Ernest Hemingway, shot himself 2 years ago. And there she was in front of his house, feeling inadequate herself. And she just said, when people feel inadequate and unhappy, I think it's okay to take your own life. And she did. So you go through a lot as a documentarian. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint. Every film that you do is a different kind of film, and it's like you're starting over again. So there's no technique for trust. It's how you relate to somebody.
How do you do that, do you think, at the beginning with people you don't know?
You figure out who they are, and you're there for them. When I first got to Harlan County, the women didn't tell me their correct names. They said that they were Florence Reese and Martha Washington and, all these different names. And we were driving down Pine Mountain, and it was really slippery, and there were no guardrails, and our car turned over. And we crawled out of the car, brought all our equipment and came down to the picket line. And from that moment, everything opened up to us. We lived with them. We were part of them.
Fantastic. Well, Barbara, in your work, we've seen you attacked, and as you mentioned, a gun pulled on you and your crew by strikebreaker Basil Collins in Harlan County, USA. You've been physically in the middle of conflicts, like when the scabs crossed the picket line in American Dream. And Cecilia, your work has shown light on dangerous cults like NXIVM and Twin Flames Universe, which are made up of aggressive, vindictive people with resources. In the case of Escaping Twin Flames, the cult is still active and they refuse to speak with you. And in this film, Shut Up and Sing, we encounter the country music DJs in Lubbock and San Antonio who refuse to play the Chicks' music. So as documentarians, how do you both approach confronting the bullies, the antagonists, or the hostile subjects?
Well, I think that you don't confront them. At least I don't confront them. I think you want to hear their part of the story. Because if you confront them, you're just making a divisive enemy out of them, and you don't learn anything. In American Dream, there were a whole bunch of guys that just couldn't take being on the picket line. And in American Dream, it was a very small town. Your father worked in the packing house, your grandfather worked in the packing house, and you worked in the packing house. Everybody knew everybody. And these 4 guys decided that they were going to cross the picket line, knowing what that would mean to them. And they did, and we went with them. And the only way we can do things, I think, in our lives, whether we agree with someone or we don't, is to communicate with them and to listen to them. And that's what I think we try to do as filmmakers, not confront them. I mean, neither one of us are I gotcha filmmakers. Right. We want to do a film that's very humane and a film that really allows people to think about different things that they never would have before.
Yeah. But I think documentaries do confront injustice, and you're sometimes shedding a light on or investigating a subject that people don't want exposed. So, there can be retaliation or threats to filmmakers, but I think you just don't let that stop you. And also you trust that you've done the research and what you're putting on the screen is the truth, so you're protected by that. And there are, teams of lawyers also, you have to have evidence for what you show on the screen. So I think that also protects you.
And there are many aspiring filmmakers in the audience, some of whom may have questions for you in our audience Q&A. But in addition to issues with securing funding, what kind of advice do you have for students who may be working under increasing regimes of censorship?
Oh, that's a very big subject that we're confronting right now. Getting funding for any film, I think, is the hardest thing that you can do, particularly if it's a social issue. And right now, the National Endowment for the Humanities, people who worked hard, and it's a really hard grant to get, have done their proposals and their contracts and been awarded grants and had to give them back. And the way that it works is that you do, it's given to you in allotments, and you do a certain portion, and then you're able to get that grant money to pay for that, and you go on and on like that. And that's not happening. The National Endowment for the Arts is only allowed to give grants to people who are going to celebrate the 250 years of our nation. And I think networks are getting very frightened of putting, material on that has social issues. So we're in a very difficult situation, but like the Chicks, we're going to do it. We have strength, we have positivity, we have all of you who came tonight to help us, and you just can't stop.
I love that, and I'm just hoping we get some questions from the audience too.
Okay. If there are any.
Yeah, we'll open it up to questions from the audience shortly. And I'll conclude with this question. Barbara, you have dealt with American wars from different time periods and angles in your career, from your involvement in the film Winter Soldier from 1972 and in your 2005 documentary Bearing Witness, which followed women war correspondents in Iraq. 20 years after the height of the global war on terror, what do you hope that audiences take away from a film like Shut Up and Sing once the jingoism and the drumbeat of war has faded?
That these are people who stood up for what they believed in. And these are people who were strong and made themselves stronger. And they're people that I adore, the friendships that they have, the tight relationship that they have. You couldn't ask for anything else.
And I also think that being able to watch them make music and document the process of creativity is not something you see too often, and it's what helped them through, and especially in a time where I think creativity is being threatened by technology. It's so important to stay creative, and also just their integrity in a time of cynicism and divisiveness, and their courage and passion was just very inspiring to us as filmmakers.
And I think also to all the others who stood up for them. I mentioned Taylor Swift. She had the Chicks work with her on a song of You'll Be Better, which is her mother, Andrea, was dying of cancer. And she wanted them to be on. And she just showed them that she had support for them by putting them on music, on her album, and many others who helped. Bruce Springsteen, who's standing up against Trump these days. And so many. I mean, we could talk about it, but I'd rather talk about more hopeful, strong things.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we can open it up to questions from the audience.
Thank you. You filmed this, you started this in 2003. I'll stand up. And here we are in 2025. What do you see when you were filming this then compared to what is going on in our world now? Particularly, as you said, Barbara, people are standing up. Our artists, our filmmakers, our documentarians, our independent filmmakers are the voices we need to be hearing now more than ever, I believe. But how do you compare it? That's one question. The other is, do you still have contact with the Chicks? And how do they feel now after all of these years?
I feel that more than ever, we need to keep making these films. I'm doing a film right now. We're in editing, but still doing some shooting on unions and non-unions. And it's UPS, the Teamsters, it's Amazon, it's the Deliveristas, who are the people who deliver food on their bicycles through wind and snow, and most of them are illegal, and the baristas from Starbucks, and to really see who workers are today and to see what's happening with them. And we just have to struggle and get our work out there and not be silent. Do you want to talk about?
Well, yes, but also to talk about what's happened between then and now. I think in our country we saw two very powerful revolutionary movements with the Me Too movement and then Black Lives Matter, where so many of us were in the streets and using our voices, and it felt like we were heading in a very positive direction. Those were incredibly exciting movements and times, and now I think we're just very afraid of a lot of that progress and those freedoms being rolled back. So I think we're back to where we were when we made this film.
And also the Chicks changed their name because of George Floyd. And they did it, I guess, after Lady
Antebellum.
And she's Lady A. now, so people just don't want to be connected. They want to be free to be able to do the things that they need to do to keep going.
But we have stayed in touch with the chicks. We invited them to this screening. They all would have liked to come. They weren't able to. Natalie's here in California, and she was busy tonight, and the other two chicks were celebrating their third sister's book launch in Texas, but they sent their love, and they're proud of the film. And yeah, we've remained in close touch and in admiration of them.
And they'll probably come next time.
A 30th anniversary.
Right. One thing that we wanted to talk about too was the first time that the chicks saw the film, because we didn't show it to them. And I remember it well because it was my birthday that day, and I didn't know whether it would be a happy one or not. So we plied them with wine and I didn't know if the wine was enough. But we all went into a small edit room, and Cecilia and I watched them watch the film. And each one of them was like in their own cocoon. Like one of them was just holding her legs, and another one was sitting with hunched shoulders. And when Emily said, we would lose our career if we had to.
Marty
said that, yes. And Natalie just put her hand on her leg, and she said, I didn't know that you felt like that. And it was just an extraordinarily beautiful, beautiful screening that we had. And we also showed the film in Toronto, which was really fun. It was one of the first documentaries that ever got into the huge ballroom. And there were, hundreds and hundreds of people that were there to see it. And we were just so happy and so excited to be part of it. Did you want to talk about Tom Hanks?
Well, I was telling Barbara earlier about some feedback that we had gotten when Tom Hanks, the actor, came to a screening in Los Angeles, and his comment after was, thank you so much for that scene when they're at Sony Music in New York and Natalie is just so tired and so much has happened, and Simon is trying to get them to go on certain shows, and she says something like, can't we just be the kind of artists we want to be? And he said she really spoke for all of us, because it's a different machine to do publicity and promotion, and I think we've all felt that way. So it was just interesting to hear him point out that scene.
So as AI gets better and better and fake news becomes more and more real, and found footage can be created, does this cause problems for you as documentarians in the future?
I think you should talk about this a little.
Well, I think people really yearn for the truth and will gravitate even more toward real documentary. And also, there's so many platforms for documentary right now, more than ever. And even, YouTube and on your phone, I think there will continue to be so many ways to show them, because people do want the truth.
But the thing is with AI is, even with documentary, we're not going to know what's real and what's not real. And also, for some reason, Cecilia's not talking about her extraordinary daughter, Ondine, who is now.
So my daughter just graduated from college and has a job working at one of the agencies in their new tech department. So she's very much on the forefront of, figuring out with the intersection between AI and film and creativity.
So she's going to learn a lot.
Barbara, I'm getting into the geeky. Harlan County was extraordinary, and I was just getting into politics when that came out, and it always affected me about trying to work for the week. Anyway, I'm supposed to be making a question.
You can
There
say
was-
whatever you want. This is free speech.
There was the shooting scene in Harlem when you were there. And in fact, the Academy Award this year went to the Palestinian film, and there was that horrible shooting scene. And it's not as dramatic, but you get the Dixie Chicks to talk about their lives and their art in the most incredibly intimate way. Is that a gift that just comes down when you have the camera out there? I don't think it's from the camera. I think you elucidate it. And can you verbalize that, bringing that sort of truth out that's so extraordinary?
Well, I think, and I speak for Cecilia too, and I'm sure she'll say something, but I think that we both really love people and really care about people and want to know as much as we possibly can about who they are and what they're about. And that's the mechanism that I use, and I think you use also, in trying to get people to open up and to really tell you, darkest secrets or darkest things or lightest things that they've never told anyone before. And also people are really ready to tell their stories. They want to tell their stories because they realize that silence just eats them up inside. And that's the way I go about my work. Do you feel the same way?
Yes, but do you also want to talk about what it felt like to have a gun pointed at you in Harlan County?
Well, I was very young and very sassy. And this guy named Basil Collins asked me for my identification. And I said I worked for UPS, and I actually did have a press card from UPS, but I didn't really work for UPS. And then I asked Ann, who was working with me, Lewis, to go get it, and I asked for his identification, and he said, well, I may have misplaced mine. And I said, well, I may have misplaced mine as well. And then one of the women, and he drove off, and then one of the women said, you're going to get shot now. The last camera crew that was here, got shot. And a few days later, they had machine guns with semi-automatic carbines. And they came across the river, and I figured I did sound for about 20 years, and I was doing sound. And I thought, okay, I brought these people here. I have to protect them. And I just walked straight into them. And they started kicking me and hitting me, but I didn't feel anything because I had a Nagra from here to here, and I had a long fish pole with a mic, and I just started swinging it at them. I was young and crazy. But I mean, yes, it was frightening. And then the next day, everybody had guns. And I guess when you're scared, you feel fear. And there was all these juices in my mouth that made me very scared because they had all their guns pointed at us. And I spoke to one of the organizers, and he was scared too. And our side had guns too, but nothing happened. The women broke it up and started singing, and they turned around and left the gun sucks.
Leave it to the women.
Yes.
Yes.
Cecilia, you had the cultists who talked to you about incredibly intimate things. That's a gift.
I think they also feel that by telling their stories, they can help other women maybe not join cults or become more aware of coercive groups, and it also helps them to turn their trauma into activism, and they've used the word post-traumatic growth to talk about the process of being, heard by a documentary crew and having their stories matter. So I think we find that people want to tell their stories.
And the stories will never be erased. They're here. Once you get it, once you make a film, it's out there, and they can't take away that history from you, which is very important, to have a legacy.
That's a nice segue for me, because I'd like to know where Shut Up and Sing is available, as well as the conversation with Gregory Peck. There's so many places to find movies these days.
I don't know if it is available. We were just wondering.
We're sort of in the midst of Shut Up and Sing, and Criterion is really interested in it.
Wasn't that Conversation?
What? Oh, Conversation,
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about Shut Up and Sing, because it was distributed by the Weinstein Company. And we all know what happened to that. So we're going to investigate it and see where it can be shown. And it should be shown now because of the timeliness of it.
So one question was, with the reduction in government funding and there just being less of it, do you have an idea of what the impact is going to be on independent documentaries? And then I was kind of interested, as there's more pressure on a free press, if documentaries might kind of fill that space in a way?
Well, I mean, they're trying to take away the federal funding of NPR, PBS, and so many places that would show these kinds of documentaries. And it's very difficult always, as I said, to get money, but then you can look for people who have money, and we call them angels, and sometimes they'll contribute and help you, or you can go online and do funding, but it's the most difficult part for me of making a film is the funding.
Hi, thank you so much. I was just wondering, in the past 2 decades or so since the incident with the chicks and since you've released the documentary, how do you think the role of public figures not typically involved in politics has evolved, if at all, recently, more contemporarily, especially, like, for example, last year, it was people really sincerely thought that if the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, Taylor Swift was going to storm the field and endorse Kamala Harris. I'm just wondering how you think their roles have evolved as not traditional political figures now in a more political space.
Well, but I mean, I think we're living in a climate of fear right now, but do you want me to talk about Greg? I feel like I did already.
I think, nonviolence and
You
so forth.
I mean, I spoke a little bit before about having a father who wasn't afraid to use his voice, and our father was a very strong, opponent of guns and advocate for gun control legislation, and he, I think was fairly alone among his group of peers as actors in having a voice and taking the risk of having a conscience and continuing to make films that championed diversity and that spoke out against prejudice of any kind. So, I hope that rubbed off on me. I think that's where I try to come from as a filmmaker, and that you just, have to stand up for what you believe in.
Does that answer it thoroughly?
Yes, thank you, I appreciate it.
Do you want more?
No, that's perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.